Boom. And we're live straight to the AI Journal LinkedIn page with another LinkedIn Live. I hope everyone that's tuning in today is having a brilliant week and having a great Friday as we come to the weekend. And today I'm really excited because we get to interview someone that's got an amazing business, an amazing background, and some really exciting developments. Justin Beals, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat. AI has been a really important technology like throughout my career, not only just at StrikeGraph. And so it's really fun to be able to chat about it more broadly and then how we're utilizing it at StrikeGraph.
Yeah. And we were just talking about it before to anyone tuning in about how the energy in Seattle for startups and for companies that are involved with tech right through to the bigger companies and how it's somewhere that's definitely on my agenda now. COVID restrictions are being relaxed to get out there and see all these tech companies and see exactly like what StrikeGraph is doing to understand the landscape and to see what world we might be living in going forward. So it's really exciting. And I kind of just want to give the audience a bit of an overview. So before we get into it, I've got some questions that I'd really love to ask you about so you can kind of teach me on a few topics, Justin, and hopefully our audience as well. But maybe you can just give us a background overview of what your experience has been and what's led you to go with StrikeGraph and what's led you to this current moment in time, please.
Yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love working at startups, and I have since the very beginning of my career. Initially did a number of bootstrap companies that we built. And then I had a colleague that was building a venture capital backed business here in Seattle, Washington area, and invited me to come join as their chief technology officer. And that's the typical role that I play as a CTO or a product kind of, I hate to say visionary, but in some ways it's true, you know. And actually, that's how I came across this compliance issue. I had a really great enterprise tech startup. It was actually an AI company. We had a tool that would recommend the likelihood that a high performer would be a good fit for a particular job. And we shared a lot of really critical data. And our customers, people like Deutsche Bank, asked for some trust in us that we could keep that data secure. And it was a massive problem for me as a CTO to do well. And everyone has their own stake in the game. And so I thought, man, it would be great to build an organization, a company that could help other companies get the trust assets that they need to drive revenue. Yeah.
That's such a big point as well, Justin. It's trust and authenticity and security to make sure as we become more digital to actually understand it. And I was having a conversation, I've had quite a few of these conversations at the moment with the importance of having that correct infrastructure for protecting that data and for making sure it's secure, and especially within compliance and making sure that these right standards are adhered to, because when we've heard about companies going into customers, how they're not following the processes. So I guess I'd love to start, Justin, by looking at this topic of compliance and automation. And combining them both together, compliance automation, how has compliance automation solved privacy and these problems and issues that keep happening time and time again, maybe from startups right through to the bigger publicly traded, please?
Yeah. First off, I want to highlight this is pretty nascent kind of process, especially where it's attached to sales and deep into the tech. I think that for a long time as a CTO, I dealt with the security of the information, you know, trying to keep it private, but it was very loosely defined, right? Like I did a lot of work in education technology. We share a lot of sensitive data there. And they had a very informal requirement called FERPA, which is basically the rule was keep sensitive data private, but not a lot of guidance beyond that, right? And so that's super dangerous, right? You can make all kinds of crazy decisions about what you think meets that particular requirement. And so kudos to teams like ISO, the AICPA that publishes the trust services criteria, that's SOC 2, PCI DSS, for giving us better defined standards to kind of go after and understand what security broadly, like across the business, not just technology is. And what that's levered into is some important maturity signals for buyers. You know, like, oh, you have a SOC 2 certificate or a SOC 2 audit or report. You have an ISO 27001 certificate. I think I can trust that you're not only operating a secure practice that meets a standard, but you go and get reviewed on that practice once a year. And so this is becoming a sales issue. And anytime security becomes a sales issue, I actually think that's like a net benefit to all of us, right?
Yeah.
Because the buyers are smarter. They're like, hey, I don't want to buy you unless I think you're implementing good security, which means security becomes a revenue generator. Isn't that better than saying, oh, I didn't get hacked, I guess we spent enough money this year?
That's a good way, yeah, a good way of measuring it in your KPI target review meetings. Like,
exactly. When you tell the board you need another, security engineer, and they're like, why? And you're like, well, it's because, $5 million of revenue last year relied upon our ISO 27001 certificate. And so it's very pragmatic way to go after it and very ethical. So what I think that when we talk about automation, one of the things to be really careful about is sometimes automation, especially as an engineer, a technologist myself, I think about, oh, I wrote code and now security is automated.
Yeah.
That's dangerous in some ways, right? Like human beings have to be in the loop when we talk about security. But the important part where I think about automation, it's a very broad word, is essentially helping an organization scope the right security practice. Because even though we have a standard, it doesn't dictate what security works for your business. It just wants to measure that the security you identified meets that rubric, right? An assessment, like a quality assurance process.
Yeah.
And so our take on automation is not that, hey, do a bunch of technology integrations and you're well secured. It doesn't work that way, actually.
Plug in an API and bingo.
Yeah, that's a great way to fail, actually. And so our take on automation is more like we have automation and intelligence and our technology platform and expertise that helps a company get to the right security posture very quickly. Yeah.
I'd love to hear it. And I'd love to know from, because this is something I haven't touched on for some time, and to be completely transparent, it's in engineering, where my background was, it was a very big indicator of, are we going to work with that company or not? Are we going to supply them with infrastructure or automation solutions? Or is that robotics provider going to pick us because are we up to that standard yet? How do you see it changing, Justin, with new technologies coming out, new frameworks of working, new future of work? Where do you see things like the you said the SOC 2 and ISO approved? And you kind of touched on it. How do you see it adapting? Because as you said, ethics, regulation, they're always going to be a talking point. What do you see for the future kind of viewpoint?
Yeah, so the authors of standards, like the ISO body, they actually just released a brand new version of the 27002 Annex, which is a list of the kind of the rubric, how they're going to measure you. So I think what we'll see, and we see this in other standards-driven marketplaces, where the standards bodies are going to continue to innovate as kind of technology and risks change in the broader landscape. And I think the AICPA will release a new version of the SOC 2, they call it Trust Services Criteria, here in the next couple of years. And so they'll constantly be updating both the assessment methodology and the standard itself. And you're going to kind of drive against that. And then I think that where we see technology impacting security, and this is a big calling card for StrikeGraph with our customers, is that we don't force our customers into technology decisions for their security. As a CTO, every product we designed was unique because we were trying to be a market leader, right? And so the technology decisions that we wanted to make, even not like, oh, I picked AWS over Azure, more like, what am I using for logging and monitoring? It really is dependent upon the type of product you're delivering. And so I think any system that's saying we're going to make you secure by forcing you into these technology integrations is actually not making you do technology work that won't make you more secure and doesn't fit your business at the end of the day. And so we shy away from things that make technology decisions for a CTO. And I think to your point, Tom, I always wanted to make decisions about what the best tooling was for our product and then make it secure. And I just really want, great engineers. You might not have done it in a while, but I'm sure you're very talented, be able to make those decisions for your organization as well. And you can, right? Like all of these certifications are designed to allow you to pick the technology that works for you. And so when we do see systems that, or like, here, if you use our system, you'll be secure. I just, it's just not a good way to think about making security happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess you kind of, well, I'm just thinking it through my head. It would kind of badger me into a corner, thinking like that's the way I can go. I'd be more apprehensive. It's like push, 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 push. I'd be like, no, like it would scare me even more. No,
Yeah, I wrote a great article on TechCrunch recently that was like, if any vendor is saying to get secure, you need to integrate with us, just run the other way, right? Because anyone that says technology work is required to get more secure is actually missing the point of getting more secure, because the first thing that's required is good scoping and understanding what you've already secured and just making sure it's locked down well, right?
Yeah. And it's I can take that and I can push it to another technology as well that I'm thinking of, because I see it quite a lot, Justin, where companies go chase that shiny new toy or the shiny new technology, but they haven't actually, and you alluded to the point as well, which is a great point, I always reason with it, and quite a few people that come on the show, looking at the roadmap of, okay, well, what actually do I need to picture out? And that kind of brings me along to the next question I'll ask you, Justin, because going off the security element and making sure people are ISO approved, how do we look at it, or how do customers, or how do companies, or maybe how can they look at it from what types of data that define what process they need to take? Because I see it with RPA coming in, for example, and they don't know what they want to do with it. It's just, well, if you automate it, we'll save money, right? It's like, maybe like, you've got 5 years and a good CTO and a great digital transformation team, but
yeah. Well, RPA is a great example, right? I think, we did a little bit of research into RPA as we were looking about automation around compliance and kind of how that marketplace had emerged. And one of the really telling things is that it's very rare that an organization adopts an RPA tool and doesn't have to go hire an ISV or consultants, to implement it. The technology is still hard, even if they put a GUI around it. So it's when I think about this, this kind of RPA issue, and especially where people are just like, here, plug these things in and you'll be secure. Take a step back, especially when you're thinking about a roadmap, and identify the risks. I know it seems a little pedantic, like, oh, that's the old school way of doing it, but it actually works really good, right? Like you wouldn't code a feature in a product if you didn't have a good scope for what it should do. And you shouldn't implement technology or security practices if you don't understand what problem it's solving for. And so on the StrikeCraft platform, what we do is a customer comes on board and we have a standard risk assessment. It's only about 45 risks. And it takes them a couple hours. And for each risk, the way they score it, we recommend security controls that they can implement to mitigate the risk. And then all of a sudden, in just a couple hours, they have a defined security posture that kind of meets their business and risk profile. And as you plan, you're like, oh, we're launching this new feature, or our AI tool needs this new set of sensitive data. You identify a new risk, identify whether or not a control mitigates it that you already have or you want one, and then you understand what security to implement. So scoping is critical.
And I was going to say, not even just scoping or security, I'm thinking visibility and your confidence on what you want to do next, Justin, because to use this example, if I go on holiday and I run up a credit card bill, I don't like checking that credit card bill when I get back home, but I need to check it because I need to know my viewpoint. And I imagine it's very similar to a business. You need to know where you're standing so you know what opportunities are ahead of you. So it's not actually a negative. It's where are we standing? Where are the loopholes? And I think that's a really good way you've given an example, Justin, because people sometimes forget. I'll be transparent with the audience. I forget to audit my business or audit the company and where you are with it. And I think it's such a great point that you're making. Otherwise, you've got a big problem.
These are all habits, right? I mean, I get that we want to imagine that let's say you're using Terraform, right? And you've automated your deployment infrastructure with CI/CD. And so you know that every time the firewall gets deployed, the ports are locked down the way you want. But you still want like your DevOps engineer to come in and check and QA that code in a regular process, right? You don't want to just rely that some other third-party system is double checking it for you every single time.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's I don't know if you've seen it, Justin, but I watched the other day, and whatever someone's viewpoint is, it's on Netflix. It's about the Boeing problem where the 2 plane crashes that unfortunately happened. And it just shows you, like, I was thinking straight to that point because I was thinking there was clearly processes. If they had double checked it, and when they go interview ex-engineers or ex-heads of security or protocol or processes that had been let go.
Yeah.
It wasn't happening before, and all of a sudden they've got a tool that they didn't even tell the pilots that was part of the plane anymore. And it's that kind of thinking, and that's what I'd love to know from you is, so let's take an example. If someone's starting or they've got a business and they're looking at the data and they don't know where to define what their security posture is, what level they're at, what kind of initial steps can you share, Justin, on what might be a good example for them, or what kind of tools you've got at StrikeGraph? As you said, you've got the 46 questions, is it?
Risk assessment. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, risk assessment is definitely a phenomenal starting place. There are a couple other activities that are really critical that can help you understand what the scope of your risk might be. Data classification, especially for AI companies, right? You deal with so much sensitive data probably coming in to your product to help predict or make a recommendation from your AI tooling, that understanding that data classification is really critical. And actually, it's a great exercise too for identifying what data you don't need. I think in building AI products, we were really greedy about data for a long time, right? We're like, get it all, and our accuracy will be much higher. But I found running a couple of AI feature sets or AI founded products that it's actually better to say what data doesn't matter and eschew that from coming into your platform so you don't have to manage it, you know?
Yeah, that's really important.
One other thing that's really good is I just think it's excellent to engage with a third party if this is not your expertise, like StrikeGraph, right? A big part of our solution is advising customers not only on best security practices, but also how to get that trust, what we call a trust asset, which is any, you know, performed audit or some third-party verification that you can hand over and market yourself with. And so I think having an advocate there for you, an advisor there for you that's seen a bunch of companies go through this process is very helpful as well.
Yeah, and it's not just in security, right? It's like anything, because as you've seen with the companies you've been involved with, Justin, and seeing that from my perspective as well. That's why we have a board. We have a board to advise me on things I don't understand and I don't know. And companies shouldn't know those things. And someone said that we had on the show, they were saying, well, why would you go and build it all in-house and take all that time to learn it when you can just go outsource it to professionals such as yourself? It doesn't make sense. It's like you wouldn't do this in you wouldn't. They made some analogy which I can't remember, but they were like, if you wanted a 5-star meal, you wouldn't try and cook the recipe at home, you go out for it. And it's exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah, and it's what a slog, right? I mean, and we have found sadly that there not only are there solutions in the marketplace that don't really, you know, they kind of try to take a shortcut and they skip building a good security posture. But even auditors, you know, we've seen auditors that are just like, implement this list of security tools and give me these screenshots and you're done. And that's just ridiculous, right? Like these guys are supposed to be the experts. And so I really, and some of the big ones like do this type of practice. So you'd be shocked at the brand, you know, that is so paper thin on actually getting an organization to have good security inside of them. And so that's my number one criticism of a lot of the consulting solutions that are out there is they don't have, they don't really treat your business or your solution with the uniqueness and flexibility that it needs. They're trying to ram through the maximum number of audits they can in the year to make the most amount of money. And you really want to
add you into something that you don't actually need.
Exactly. Yeah, they'll and you're not the expert. You don't know. So the auditor is telling you what you needed to do. And let me just say, I made this mistake as a CTO, right? Like I was like, oh, what should we do for security? And I downloaded a bunch of policy templates and I thought, maybe this is good. But what I wound up doing was building a security posture that was unmanageable because it didn't match our business at the end of the day.
Didn't match the blueprint. And it's one of those things where you think it looks good, you go to sleep, and then you wake up and you're like, what have I written?
That's right.
You're like, I'm screwed, but I'm questioning myself, I question my authority. But I think everyone with good experience such as yourself has been in those situations because it's where you learn. And I'd love to know, so looking at it from product leaders and CTOs, considering AI versus data science, big trends at the moment, areas people are getting involved in, as we touched on, very important to the modern day business compared to maybe the more traditional businesses.
Yeah.
How can they take this and how can they use this to develop predictive models or to use it in their business to give them insights and to give them adaptability, I can't even say the word,
Adaptability. Yeah.
adaptability or openness to understand where they currently stand, Justin?
Yeah. I think the AI moniker and the data science moniker is an interesting conversation unto itself, right, Tom?
Yeah.
Having built, I mean, StrikeGraph, well, to me, all the products that I build these days, we have a database layer, we have a business logic layer, we have a front end layer. Now we have an AI layer or a data science layer. I always think about what in my product needs to be driven by data science. Now, to me, I separate AI and data science in this way. Data science is building a model, collecting the data, testing for accuracy and validation, and getting some prediction out the side of it. But almost always, right, Tom, those predictions are like a numerical value between 0 and 1, or something that no one can really effectively consume. Yeah. So when I think about artificial intelligence or AI, that's the interface between the data science that a human can consume. And why do we call it AI? Because the human believes that it's intelligent. I mean, you and I know it's a black box of, a neural net or even just a Bayesian predictor on some, basic level. But really, we have to design an interface in the AI. So as you're thinking about security when you're dealing with an AI solution, and one of the things I've noticed in the AI marketplace of technologies is that an AI-driven company is being asked for security maturity right off the bat, right? Like you're not going to get an adoption unless you're SOC 2 audited or ISO 27001 certified right away, pretty much. And so we have some people pre-product that are already going through a security certification.
I'm already looking that far ahead because I heard in the UK, it's with the data centers. If you're not plugged into one of those data centers, they're not going to deal with you. Maybe be a governmental organization or a national business, and it just won't. If you're not part of that data center for that country or for that European location, your deal's not happening. Like it's not going ahead, and it's incredible forward thinking that way.
You got to build it in right away. Absolutely, and so I think that when you get down to what security needs to go around my data science and my AI, the critical places to look are data classification, because you're probably dealing with very sensitive information. Then you need to think about pretty classic stuff like encryption and backups and that securitization of that data long term. What's the life cycle of the data? And then you need to think about broader governance. And where AI specifically is concerned, I think some of the important security controls, we like a control-centric model for managing a security posture. One of the critical controls that I love writing in when we do AI work is like accuracy measures or validation. Like I had an AI product that dealt a lot with people and jobs and hiring. And it was really critical for us to build validation techniques for protected classes, right? Like we didn't want our AI to be biased against people of color. And so we wrote a security control into our security practice that validated that our model, our newest model, wouldn't run afoul of a bias issue.
That's really cool. And I think it's a great point because I'd like to ask you, Justin, as well, with your experience, and this isn't distinctly related to what we've just been discussing, but with new technologies coming, I've seen a lot around the metaverse and I've seen a lot around all these new businesses that are popping up. The amount of new businesses that are popping up is insane. Like that are either getting funded or they've got a proven model or whatever it is. How do you see that tying in? And we kind of touched on it earlier, but where is it you see these problems such as bias hitting those areas? Because obviously it's quite a big, although it's not directly related, or maybe it is, it's not directly related. How do you find that kind of landscape at the moment? Because all of that needs security, and as you said, you've put in a protocol to overcome that. What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, first off, I want us to own our power as engineers and inventors in this space, right? We are responsible for the ethicality, the ethics of the products that we build. And anyone that is doing a startup in this space that is not taking into account the ethics of what they're doing, it's just not right, right? Like These are very powerful tools. People make important decisions about them. You need to be ethical in the way you're developing them. Now, you and I both know that we pour data in, we get a model out, we're doing that testing all the time, right? So it's a very vibrant situation, let alone when we automate it, right? Like when we're just taking new ingested data and remodeling in an automated fashion.
Yeah.
If you don't think about testing that model, for the appropriate metrics, even if it's just accuracy, but let alone things like protected classes or the other impacts that it can have. And build into your tooling, just like you would a DevOps CI/CD, your AI tooling needs that type of validation. Then you will create an issue, like period. So I think it's great that startups are emerging and that we're using these tools for very exciting things. Remember that you are in control of the ethics of what that does, and your reputation is on the line, let alone your whole entire organization. And so when we think about things like Meta as an organization and ethics, I think it's, there's a applicable complaint. Now, what we did is, for example, when we were doing some of the HR modeling, we built a standard suite of validation tests that we coded on top of the model development. So every time we built a model, it also ran the validation tests between an existing data set. And so we could chart, the relative issues that might be emerging with models over time and new data sets against a common data set.
That's cool to see. That's really cool to see, Justin, how you can kind of look at that as well, because as bad as it is sometimes, I always think it's an opportunity to learn how not to think that bad. And I always try and swing it that way, because even if it's a situation like Meta, or like however you view that situation is up to you. But however I looked at it, I was always thinking, well, this is interesting, right? Because it's an opportunity to figure out this isn't how it should be, or this is how we can learn from it, or this is how we can make progress, and this is how we can make better technology, and this is how we can better correctly make sure a business is secure or consider ethics. And I think that's what I would tell the audience, for anyone watching at the moment, is to always think about it that way, because otherwise you can get so caught up in this this bad mindset, which happens quite a lot with AI. But I'd like to know, sorry if you're going to say something.
I was just going to say, we don't want to ruin our own marketplace, right, Tom? We want people to trust AI and buy more product and be able to use it. And when we have bad actors, it makes it hard for trust.
Yeah. And I think it's a great point, Justin, because I was saying earlier in another conversation that people don't understand AI, so I don't blame them that they come up with these arguments and ideas of, oh, isn't AI going to take my job? But I actually realized something. I looked back, Justin, and I said, anyone I know, a CTO or a CEO of a company that deals with AI, cloud, or high-tech computing, they're not scared of AI. I was like, that's a clear picture to me that if you understand it and you understand the roadmaps, as we were going to earlier, it makes it a much more interesting journey and understanding where that problem is. So I think that's a really good point.
I was super curious about like, where is AI going in humans a couple of years back, and so one of the research activities that I took on, I was like, well, who's the biggest user of AI? And strangely enough, where I landed was one of my hobbies is sailing, and one of the biggest users of AI systems is the navigators on sailboat racing in the ocean, right? And what they're doing is they are counterbalancing 5 or 6 different modeling techniques on top of the weather data, and then making a decision about the best route. And so I think this is where it's going, right, Tom? People are not just going to have one AI engine that's making recommendations. They're going to have multiple. And they're going to need to be a human expert on the other side, kind of counterbalancing a decision between them.
Because all the opportunity, all the what do you call it, situations or scenarios you'll get out of that will be very, very different. Was it IBM? I don't know who it was that set the first autonomous sailboat across the Atlantic. Manned, but I think it was IBM, or was it someone else?
Definitely a couple of research groups. They have this this sail pod thing that's been going back and forth against the ocean. That's self-navigating.
Incredible to see all that, like just that they can map like the ocean. And I mean, it's Unity that are building a digital twin of the world, or they plan to. I don't know if they're.
Oh, that's really cool. You
just think like all the situations you'll be able to get off that, and all the millions and millions and millions of different opportunities if you're running that simulation again and again and again. Because there I was thinking, well, a digital twin's pretty good for an aeroplane engine because you can test how robust it is. But then Unity blew me out the water by saying, oh yeah, we should make a digital twin of the whole world. So
yeah, I read a great article recently about what we're doing now with data science and AI is brute forcing large data sets into correlation matrices, right? And what we haven't really researched very well is the symbological method of AI development, right? Like understanding a rule set from a data that you can apply in other places. And I do think for these machines to get more intelligent, we're going to have to aggregate models and symbological kind of algorithms that can key off of each other. And in truth, that's probably how our brains work.
I always just think like neural network synapses, how many decisions are going on up there. Just like try and model that, just sends me like blows my head off the water. So it's pretty crazy. But I'd like to ask one more question, Justin, about. And however you've seen this across your experience and across your roles and the great experience you've had, where do you see security, if you can, or maybe it's a couple, but maybe just point one of them out? Where do you see it in departments as maybe the biggest critical indicator, or you've seen the best scenario of how it's been fixed, if that's worded correctly? So is it within HR when you're dealing with people and they haven't done something? Is it with a technical team and they haven't done something as set up two-factor authentication, or I guess that's a company-wide issue? Or is it within sales not actually harnessing that, or is it R&D? Well, I'd love to know.
It's the whole thing, Tom.
The whole here is the whole bloody company, but
and actually, this was a really deep insight for me as I started researching what would become StrikeGraph about 2 or 3 years ago. Every time this has happened for me before being a CTO, what happens is that the sales guy is like, "Hey, I got this new customer. They're really exciting, but they're demanding that we get a SOC 2 audit done." And so you're the CTO, you're going to do that, right? That's your job. And at first I was like, oh yeah, it touches technology, I guess I have to do it. But that's not true. If you go read the standards, ISO, if you go read the trust services criteria from AICPA, half or less deals with specific technology security. The vast majority of these standards are like HR practices, appropriate contract negotiation, vendor management, change. Then you start getting a little bit into tech, which is change management for your tech. And then appropriate, prioritization of feature development, then breach notification. You're still not to encryption, right? We're talking all like human processes.
Incredible.
And so when you finally get down to, is the database encrypted or is the database backed up? I mean, I think our CTO for our own SOC 2 certified practice or audited practice, our CTO maybe manages 1/3 of the controls that we have. The rest go to the rest of the organization.
Yeah. That's incredible to think, though. It's just, and it blows my mind as well, because if you think and thinking bigger, my mind instantly, and I'm learning a lot here, Justin, so I really appreciate it and thank you. But if you look at it from your thinking around security of a small company, and then you're thinking, you touched on a great thing, change management. You're going for a big digital transformation project, and you're a big company that's doing hundreds of millions of pounds in turnover, and you bring in a software company or you bring in a consultancy. The bad change management, that's what I led to. I was like, that roadmap scares me. Like it would just be like, God, that's a crazy amount of security or protocols before you even get to those stages.
Yeah. And change management has been actually a big security breach area. I forget the name of the company. It was, I think, Sun something, that had a breach through Microsoft because they were a partner for Microsoft, essentially. And their issue was that someone injected code without a good peer review system, and it got deployed to production. They didn't have a good QA process, so no one was checking that this was an issue. And over a couple of years, many systems got infected. And so change management is actually I think the front line of the security war a lot of times when you're talking about the technology part of the organization.
Yeah, such a big point to remember as well and to know. And I think it's with the very unfortunate news of what's happening at the moment with the real possibility of cyber war. They said that's the next biggest war, and it's horrible what's happening. But you do think like how protected are those things that we take for granted? It's a big thing, whether just in businesses or elsewhere. So yeah, it's a really really big topic. And we do have a question, Justin, if you're okay to answer it.
Oh, please, yeah.
This is from a gentleman called Hassam. So thank you, Hassam. Sam has asked how to pursue the customers that they need some data services and AI services. So a bit of a broad question, but I don't know if you want to take a stab at answering that, Justin.
Yeah, well, I think if you're a services type organization, you have a ton of expertise in data service and AI service, and you're looking for organizations that might need to buy your services. Yeah. First thing is that I would look for organizations that probably haven't layered in or thought about AI as a part of their entire software stack, right? Yeah. I think there's a legacy thing where like, I'm an AI company. I'm not an AI company. I don't think about it that way anymore at all, right? It's like, you better be coding this in. And so I think to Hassan's question, that's a great starting point when you're talking with someone is, have you implemented data science and AI as a common practice in how you're thinking about your product roadmap? Yeah. And if you get a yes or a no, hopefully you get a no actually, because you're like, because that's what we do. Yeah. I love the initial like 3-week research engagement, kind of like a flat bid before you go into a longer term, we'll now code this up for you and implement it. Yeah. Because then you can do some analysis on things like, this is how AI needs to be implemented in your change management process. This is a type of expertise that you might be missing that we can supply to do it. These are the types of things that your product or your competitors can take advantage of data science to make it more powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Thank you for a great answer, Justin. And thank you for a brilliant question, Hassam. So thank you. And it's really interesting on to that point. I was just going to add of how it's changed really, because we're talking about, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but the marketing of basically just saying you're AI driven to now it's, as you said, it's just, you don't even pay attention to it because it's just, well, every company should have some sort of element of data science or AI, whether you're an event company. I saw an event company that was it's a big holding group, and they've got data scientists because they understand the power of understanding their business. So it's a great point. I think it's open to anyone. It's that new digital 4.0. If you're not doing data science and AI, good luck, essentially. So
yeah. We, for StrikeGraph, we were looking around on how data science can improve our platform. And one feature that we built into our platform right off the bat that was groundbreaking for the compliance and security space was we built AI tooling that will essentially answer security questionnaires from your control database. So we ingest at StrikeGraph any questionnaire that you get, from any new buyer of your product. Some of them are massive. Like we've seen 600 questions sometimes in these Excel spreadsheets, right? Yeah. And then ours, we built a natural language processing tooling set that essentially takes those questions in and uses our ontological structure of not only your controls, but how they're aligned to certain standards, what type of risks they align with, what type of evidence you're providing to validate control operation. And we pick the control that best answers that question. So the question is, do you have good hiring practices for background checks? We can go look through the database of your controls and be like, oh yeah, they have 3 controls that deal with hiring.
Yeah, that's really good to have on hand as well to be able to change that. And have you seen that, Justin, where I guess for that 600 questionnaire, I don't even know how many questions or if you can even get to a questionnaire that big, obviously you can, but looking at it from how much that changes a business when they've used StrikeGraph to really think, okay, we were really doing this wrong in this management.
We found that this feature is really powerful for a little bit more mature organizations. So someone that's got good product market fit and they're really trying to ramp up their sales, because I've talked to CTOs that are answering 5 questionnaires a week.
Yeah.
Think about how much that takes out of your actual development and management. And oftentimes they're just doing it by hand. So definitely a lot of our enterprise customers and larger customers, that is a really powerful feature.
That's why you use NLP, I guess, to collate that and to get it all there. That's really cool. That's really
Plus, that NLP is flexible, right? You can have any control in our platform, and natural language processing allows us to connect whatever control you write.
Yeah.
There are other tools for security questionnaires that are kind of algorithmic, they're a little rote, but it's critical for us in StrikeGraph to give our customers the flexibility to design the right security posture and then represent it, right? Like get people to trust that that's a good security posture. And so for us, NLP was the only way to go to deliver on that flexibility.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'd love to know, final question, with StrikeGraph, did the pandemic, and this might be a simple no, I don't know, I'm intrigued, did the pandemic change processes or open up kind of avenues that you noticed from internal side, from your customers, to think, actually, this is now a question we need to ask, or this is, and it might be just completely new to everyone. Did that change that situation much, or not really?
I think it did. We founded our company in February of 2020, so we put the initial organization together right at the beginning of the pandemic. Now, hundreds of customers. I'm so proud of what we've achieved. Hundreds of customers, a growth rate that I've never seen, and a lot of that is we deliver. Our customers get the trust assets they need. They get clean SOC 2 reports. They get clean ISO 27001 certifications. So we're building this massive reputation for real delivery and success with actually getting the trust assets you need. I think companies that are dealing with a pandemic, it has brought good processes to the forefront of management. And it's been for StrikeGraph too, right? If you had asked me, January 2020, what I was most excited about founding StrikeGraph was like getting to work with the team in the office every day and kind of experiencing that camaraderie. Now, we can't do that because we want our teammates to be safe. I want our employees to feel cared for by the organization. Yeah. And so what it forced me to do is be more process driven and create better expectations, because we can't work as organically as we used to. And that really feeds into that control centric operation, right? To me, a control is like a user story when you're building a product, right?
Best way to look at it. Yeah, exactly. We're on the same page. I always think use a journey or use a story or paint a picture for it. Yeah.
That's right. And so a control is just like a user story. It's a quick statement about a security habit that we're going to do. And that makes it easily communicatable. It creates a process around it about how you actually do that. And it creates evidence that you've actually, done that control. That's what the auditors review, by the way. When you go in for an audit or a certification, what they're testing is your control activity. Is it well designed, and does it meet the requirement?
Yeah, that's really awesome, because I was looking at it from, and I'm quite open that I'm not a big fan of predictions, because the pandemic really taught me, or me personally, that those predictions were miles off. And I was just like, go tell Gartner and Everest to predict that. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I think that was such a big thing, because I don't know the figures before, and I should go check them out. But now we're talking about this with compliance and security, I do wonder how much it's made people value brands such as StrikeGraph because of the processes. Because processes, you touched on a great point, Justin. As soon as things turned digital and everyone was ordered to work from home, or unless you're like, what do you call it, a needed service or something, you needed to remote work, and that brought, I don't care how big you are, that's going to bring a lot of challenge and a lot of potential security gaps to think, well, this would be a piece of paper handed to you in person. Now I've got to do it via WeTransfer or via OneShare or via Slack, or whatever you're using. And I think that's such a great point for people to take away, because that's where I've seen it. Processes have really changed it.
Well, the Colonial Pipeline breach is a perfect example of that recently over the pandemic, right?
What's that? I heard about that.
So Colonial Pipeline had a major breach of their systems, the data that was in there. I think it happened in late 2020. And apparently the root cause of the issue was that engineers that had been going into the office and working in the office in a protected situation were now working from home. But Colonial Pipeline had not implemented good lockdown or data management practices and processes for those people working remotely. And so someone is able to get through a personal network into a laptop that gave them access to a broader system. So you with remote work, with some of the dynamicism of folks being strewn about quite a bit, better processes are going to be required.
Yeah. And even from the other side, if you're going to switch it, the people hacking had better processes because they thought, well, this is a process that's going to work. And I've heard a lot about the banks when we spoke to people that they don't shy away from showing that they actively hire hackers to say, show us where the loopholes are, show us where the problems are, and show us where we need to improve that infrastructure. And again, your great point, Justin. Processes, something I'm trying to get much better at the moment.
That's why we bundle in penetration testing with most of our adoptions if you're going for an audit, because you need an external team to go in and really quality assure, test, and essentially, it's white hat hacking. It's all well known, but we want to go find out, is your product got a SQL injection issue, or are you encrypted at a level that needs the level of encryption required for today's type of computing environment. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I just want to say this has been an awesome, so I've learned a lot today, and I know there's questions you might not expect it, but I was learning a lot and taking away a lot, and I hope the audience have. But can you share, Justin, where can people find out about the awesome work you and StrikeGraph are doing, you personally, and how they can get in touch with you and test out some of what you're building at StrikeGraph and see how it can help their business?
Yeah, thanks. So StrikeGraph.com is a great place to learn about the solution. And as well, there's tons of buttons on there to get in touch with our account executives and schedule a demo. We love doing demos of our solution. Come and see what we have put together and talk with them about how that solution really gets you the trust assets that you need as quickly as possible. And that's the goal here, right? Not technology integrations, not distance between you and getting that trust asset, but having some asset that represents the maturity of your organization so you can sell. It's about dollars and cents.
It's got to be. And I don't shy away from that, because I think you can't get results if you don't have more resources. And to get more, it's an easy system to follow. And I think that's a brilliant way to look at it. And I also love that StrikeGraph and you, Justin, on your team are offering demos, because I think it's such an not easy, but it's such a core thing to be able to do in this day and age, to say, look, don't just take our word for it.
Right.
Show data and we'll help you. And I think it's such a good way of doing it.
We bring expertise to those meetings as well. We have audit managers that are on staff at StrikeGraph that assist our AEs in explaining how to think about your compliance roadmap. Which one of these things should you go after first? Where are you at? And there's no dog in the hunt for us, right? We're not trying to sell a SOC 2 audit or an ISO 27001 audit. We're a preparer, of you to go for these third-party assessments. And so it's important to have someone that's been through it a fair bit to just help give you a little advice on what fits for your business. Yeah.
That's such good points. And I feel like I could talk to you forever. I was thinking maybe this would be a 15-minute conversation. Here we are. I've still got questions, which we'll take offline. But I'll be dropping all the links in the chat after this. So keep your eyes tuned. And everyone that's joined us, encourage you to reach out to Justin and to ask any questions you have and see the awesome work they're doing at StrikeGraph. And to you, Justin, really appreciate it. I've learned a lot today. Be fully transparent. I wasn't aware of half the things you talked about. So thank you for teaching me on those areas. And of course, to the audience as well. Really grateful for your time today, sir.
Thanks, Tom. It's my pleasure. Yeah.
Awesome. For everyone else, we'll see you on the next LinkedIn Live when we do one. And have a great Friday. Have a brilliant weekend and see you soon.